get some critical mass. Thanks everyone for joining us. While Dennis is pulling up the PowerPoint guide for our discussion today, I just wanted to welcome everyone to our webinar, aptly named Boost Your Revenue with Video Advertising. And we're just so excited you can make it. If you have any questions, just as a bit of housekeeping, we're going to be hosting a Q&A at the end of the session. But if the spirit moves you and you so choose to put a question into the chat, we'll be managing that along the way as well. So feel free to save, feel free to express at your leisure. My name is Britt Fowkes. I'm VP of Account Management. We're going to go through some intros of our expert panel joining us today, and we will get rolling.
Hi, y'all. I'm Becca Blader. I'm the Senior Manager of Integrated Fundraising at Make-A-Wish America.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Agalis. I'm the Director of the Neuro Fundraising Lab here at Moore.
Good afternoon. Jen Miller, Executive Creative Director at Moore. And I work on strategy and bring that to life through storytelling and compelling creative across fundraising channels, including video.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janet Tonner, and I am president of Moore's Media and Digital and Video Production Teams. We're very excited to be here today.
And I already introduced myself and blew the lead, guys. Britt Fowkes, VP of Account Management at Moore. Let's get started with our agenda. Just in case you ended up in the wrong room, to just do a quick overview. We're going to have you guys come away with some idea of strategic use of video advertising. That's our theme today. And how it supports audience growth strategies. Discovering how different types of audio or video advertising, rather, I'm using audio, impacts donors and budgets differently. How audiences tune in and how to use neuromarketing to create the most effective creative. Select optimized audiences for each type of video advertising, and how to evaluate and measure ROI and set KPIs. But it really just begins with strategy. It's probably the most important thing. So throughout the webinar, we'll be unpacking each of these items within the agenda itself in greater detail, but it's really important to set the stage to understand how Make-A-Wish's goals and strategies for utilizing video advertising as it relates to building their sustainability.
At a high level, at Make-A-Wish, we knew we needed to diversify our revenue streams where we were fundraising to set our program up for long-term success. We really wanted to focus on the health of our donor file because, like so many nonprofits right now, we are being tasked with doing more with less, and ensuring that we're continuing to cultivate a really strong and engaged donor file has sort of been our guiding light for our program. I see this very much as an iterative process. So our strategy is always evolving based on the performance that we're seeing. If we can go to the next slide. One way that we are diversifying revenue streams is by focusing on acquiring and developing high value audiences. So building out our mid-level program and growing our sustainer base. You'll see throughout this webinar that sustainers have been a major area of focus and growth for our program.
I know, Becca, you noted the iterative process that we use to balance the short-term and the long-term goal setting. So just as part of this engagement, we walk into each year just setting some very specific goals for audiences, very intentional goals, like the ones that Becca just mentioned for the audiences just mentioned. And then we optimize the investments within each of the channels and across each of the audiences to optimize based on the value to the organization. So nothing is done in any sort of silo. It's all at the audience level.
And part of how we achieve these goals is by connecting the messaging. So sharing the reasons why it's important that a donor give to Make-A-Wish and improve the likelihood of success in converting that donation, and also improving our engagement overall.
So you might wonder how all of this comes together, right? High level goals, we've got strategies. Really what helps bring this together is this visual of sorts. So using sustainers as our example, right? And our audience first vision for how we pull together goals, strategy, and execution. We leverage the power of data. We start with the raw audiences, so that could be the potential and the existing audiences for sustainer development, and blend in and integrate in machine learning and AI to understand more about these donors. So how much more can we understand about the people we are connecting with? And this really helps us understand both their propensity for giving, so what their potential is, and predictability of how they will respond. And then that also gives us information about who they are, how they engage, what channels they engage with, and what kinds of offers they have given to elsewhere. And then the journeys, which I know is used across the industry, pull that together. Think of them as a unifying guide. It's almost a book, a guidebook of sorts, of how we pull the information about the donor, where we want to lead them, both through KPI setting and other, and sort of unify the strategic outline of how we want to engage with them. Becca had mentioned, just improving the market strategy is very important to Make-A-Wish. And, that's not unique to any other organization, to other organizations too. We want to connect those donors in a more meaningful way. And the journey allows us to bring all of those pieces together from the channel, which today we're talking about video advertising, right? And the offers, sustainer, and the where and the when we integrate certain types of messaging with those donors. And then as we go through this webinar, we're actually going to bring to life how this actually happens in real time, and more specifically, the types of creative that we want to intersperse in the life cycle of these donors on their journey to becoming a sustainer. That's the needle.
Okay, so effective creative. Move to the next slide, please. So there are several must-have building blocks for effective video creative. First, we have to consider time. So for DRTV spots, they're typically 1 or 2 minutes. And that means we are very intentional about each second and each frame so that we can tell powerful stories in ways that keep attention. And it's all about the emotion. Emotion, emotion, emotion. Emotion pulls you in. Emotion keeps you engaged. Emotion is what drives action. And with all channels, as Britt just mentioned, the offer is incredibly important. It has to clearly answer, what is the need? What are you asking me to give? And what will my impact be? And so we typically will do sort of repetition of calls to action throughout spots. And we find that repeating the call to action at least 3 times in a 2-minute ad is our sweet spot. And of course, we have to have a clear and readable dedicated URL and phone number so that viewers know how to respond at any point during the spot. Now, when it comes to earned media, there's typically 3 different standard time lengths for PSAs, 15-second, 30-second, and 60-second. And what we find is that using the same video story in DRTV, PSAs, and connected TV it's like the trifecta of video storytelling. And it can create that wonderful surround sound lift, which we often supplement by developing integrated creative for billboards and wraps and other out-of-home media. And of course, the primary goal with DRTV and connected TV is getting donations. And with earned media, it's about impressions, awareness, and education. And we'll take donations too, of course, when it leads to that. But the key here is that when all these are all in market together, using a similar story, They work really well to lift brand as well as response. Connected TV spots on streaming platforms are typically 30 seconds and 15 seconds. And that is a very short amount of time to tell a story. So it's imperative that you have the right script, the right offer, and the right footage going to the right audiences. Also important to consider with connected TV is the entire journey, not just the spot itself. And that's why we create display ads that echo the creative from the spot. So there's this continuity from watching a spot, getting served up a digital ad while you're on the internet, all the way through to the donation form. And so let's take a look at how this comes together, our trifecta of video storytelling. Using the story of Wish Kid Brantley, who's adorable. We love Brantley. And we featured his story in the holiday timeframe. And we used him in DRTV, earned media, and connected TV. And we'll show you an example of one of those spots in a second. Brantley has congenital heart disease, and his wish was to see snow. And so the screenshot on the left is from our DRTV spot. And this is here to demonstrate, to show you that, yes, we're doing all those things that you need to do in terms of integrating brand visual elements. We want to make sure we've got that cohesive messaging going on. We've got that clear sustainer price point down there, $20 a month. We've got a clear and readable phone number and URL. And all of those things are really, really important. But in the actual spot, that's the power of the story. It's the power of Brantley's own words. It's watching the smile on his face when he finally gets to see snow and his wish comes to life. It's seeing him literally jump for joy. He's literally jumping on his bed for joy. And that's what makes the story so persuasive, because viewers can actually see that joyful impact unfolding right before their eyes. And that's a pretty powerful reason to give. But we also find that including a premium with a monthly gift is an important response driver. And so on the right side of your screen there, you'll see a screenshot from the DRTV spot we developed. And it's we designed and developed this I Grant Wishes t-shirt. And in the spot, it actually spins, so you can see the back of it. It's a great donor affirming message, promotes the Make-A-Wish brand. And on the back of the shirt, we have the Make-A-Wish logo. We repeat the URL, grantwishes.org. And so it's terrific brand raising every time somebody walks out the door wearing that shirt. Next slide, please. Okay, for earned media, Make-A-Wish was able to place this digital wraparound billboard in Times Square. Cannot get better than that, featuring Brantley during the time his DRTV and CTV spots were in market. So again, we can support that surround sound using Brantley's story and the message of Make-A-Wish. And we, of course, included a dedicated URL to drive somewhere if people wanted to take action. Just want to pause and see, Becca, did you want to add anything here? Want to make sure I'm covering everything.
I will say Brantley's family was so excited that he was up in Times Square. They posted it all over their Facebook, and we got some really great feedback on it. This was something that we also did some geo-targeting around as well, which we found to be pretty effective.
Right. Okay. And then finally, the third leg in our trifecta of video storytelling is a connected TV. And so, of course, we developed a spot, holiday spot around Brantley. Make-A-Wish was able to obtain a holiday match. And so we were able to include that in the connected TV spot. DRTV spots have typically monthly asks, right? It's all about sustainers. But for connected TV, where we also feature monthly asks, we can also often do one-time asks and add things because we have a quicker turnaround time, so we can add specific offers or last-minute matches and urgent messaging. And so we've talked a lot about Brantley and the smile on his face and the joy he felt. So let's actually meet him through this 30-second holiday CTV spot. Dennis, if you could play the spot.
The holidays are a time for making lists. But the most special list of all is the list of children with critical illnesses. Brantley's wish was to see snow, so Make-A-Wish brought him and his family to their own winter wonderland.
Snowmans are my favorite.
Every 20 minutes, another child is diagnosed with a critical illness. Please add Waiting Wish Kids to your holiday list. Go online to wish.org/double.
Thanks. Can you go to the next slide, please, Dennis?
The holiday.
We're going to play it again just because it's so good, just in case you didn't get. I've watched it many times. I could watch it every single time. I love it. Becca, I think you want to take this slide.
So I always say that our stories are one of our most powerful fundraising tools at Make-A-Wish. And when we pair those with really effective fundraising tactics, that's when we are able to convert people into donors and have them stick around. I know that there is nothing that me or my team or Jen and her amazing team can create that's going to be as impactful as seeing the happiness and the impact that wishes bring to our families. So when we try to bring these together, we try to make sure that everything feels very authentic when we are looking at our footage. The being able to see that wish come to life or see parents seeing their kids have an amazing time outside the hospital, like there's nothing more powerful than that. So we work really hard to capture as many of those moments as we can while also not being invasive to the family's experience. We also try to capture the different aspects of the wish experience and present them in a way that's going to help elevate the story and provide that strong reason to give. So we will show as many people as are involved in making a wish as we can. It doesn't take just one person, it takes a whole community. So when we can interview doctors, parents, the kids, volunteers, corporate sponsors, that can create a really full picture of what goes into a wish. And we found that parent and medical professional POVs tend to do really, really well. And finally, the emotion in some of these interviews and through these stories is what I think really brings our stories to life. The footage of kids seeing their wish for the first time or learning that their wish is going to be granted. It gives me goosebumps just talking about it, honestly. But they just express such pure emotion. It feels really authentic. And when we pair that with good fundraising, it really speaks to the urgency of what our organization is doing and the need to continue to help kids who are still waiting for their wishes.
All right. So as part of a lot of the pilot programs we run here at Moore, one of the key aspects that we try to incorporate as part of the client program is to do some research. And the purpose of this research is to help us. Pilot is a learning phase no matter what you do, right? We're learning from the successes, we're learning from the challenges, and we're trying to optimize and make things as good as they can be. And one of the things that's especially challenging in a pilot phase is getting a good understanding of how do we know what our audience thinks, feels, and experiences when they view this creative. How does it work from a philanthropic perspective? Maybe where are some of the pain points or things that they're not understanding or could be more effective than they already are. And as fundraisers, as creatives, as strategists, we're all very close, and that collaborative relationship that we have with the client can sometimes make it difficult to identify the opportunities to optimize the creative itself. And as Jennifer pointed out, emotion is one of the key aspects of this. And measuring emotion can be challenging with traditional research methodology. So these neuromarketing techniques can help us perform better measurement and therefore get us better insights to help us optimize and make this creative as good as it can be. And while the creative did quite well when it first launched, I think one of the goals of this research was to figure out what else can we do? Is there anything else that we can identify? Are there any opportunities that we can find to make easy edits or changes to the spot to help promote that flow of emotion, to make the sustainer ask as smooth as it can be, and to make the best case for giving we possibly can. Let's go ahead and have you move to the next slide. When we think about research broadly in terms of the studies that we run here in the lab, one of the major goals of these services are to help us optimize, whether it's strategy, offers, messaging, imagery, whatever it is. If we're testing a piece of creative, we want to help our teams make it better in whatever way we're looking to achieve the goals that we're trying to reach. Sometimes it's very specific. Sometimes that's just let's see what's there and try to make it better any way we can and identify those opportunities. In this case, we were hoping to not necessarily course correct from something that was going very wrong, but to just make it even better than it already was. So to take a look at the spots that we had that were out there and see how they compared to one another, identify strengths, identify challenges and weaknesses, and use that information to either make changes to the existing spots, but also use that information to inform the next round of creative that would be coming out, and learn from that research and learn from our audience as we're making those measurements. One of the key things that makes us different than a lot of the other market research groups out there is that we don't just use traditional research methodology like surveys and focus groups. We're also using these neuromarketing measures to measure subconscious experience with the data. So these are physiological responses to the creative that help us identify moment by moment how our audience is responding to this content. And one of the big measures that we use when it comes to video content is something called immersion. Dennis, I'll go ahead and have you move to the next slide. So when we're measuring engagement and emotion in a spot, that can be very challenging with traditional research methods. Just asking people, how did that make you feel? That can be effective, but it's not as effective as, well, how did it make you feel at 42 seconds into the spot? While we would love it if people could answer that question honestly and openly, that's a very challenging thing to do from a memory perspective, and also just challenging to ask any respondent to address in that moment. So one of the methods that we use is something called immersion, where we actually record moment by moment how people are experiencing the creative. And this technology allows us to really get a good idea of the ebbs and flows of emotion and attention as they're viewing each type of advertisement. So the way this works is we actually sync up with our respondent panel through an app that's on their smartwatch before they start their appointment. And when they get on screen with us, usually it's through a Zoom session, we sync up with that app, and then we're able to moment by moment sync up with the video and record that experience. So after we sync up with the technology, we have them watch the spot all the way through. And then after they're finished viewing the spot, we perform an in-depth interview with each respondent one-on-one to ask questions that the technology can't address. So while the technology is measuring emotion and engagement and attention, our questions are more focused on more practical aspects of the program, such as motivations, impressions, giving, and maybe kind of dig at some of the things that our creative and strategy teams believe might be happening at a very obvious level to help us get some data behind how that audience is feeling about our theories. Okay. And just to give you an idea what the data looks like, because I'll be talking about this in a little bit. So when we view immersion data, you can see on the x-axis, that's that horizontal axis at the bottom, we're looking at time. So you can see that this is a 2-minute spot that we were testing. So as we move from left to right, time increases from the very beginning of the spot to the very end of the spot, all the way at the right side of the screen. On the y-axis is our immersion quotient. This is the level of engagement that people have at any given moment. And that changes as the video content in front of them also changes. So Dennis, I'll go ahead and have you put some of the data on the screen there. So this is an example of a Cameron spot that we tested through the lab. So you can see within the first 10 seconds, it's kind of flatter engagement. People are attentive and highly engaged. A score of 60 and above is a good score. Kind of drops a little bit, rises, falls, and it kind of changes as the story goes on. I'll go ahead and have Dennis put the rest of the data on the screen, and you can see the other 2 spots there. So Holiday is in the lighter green, and Hunter, which is the spot that we'll be focusing on today, is in red. You can see Hunter spot is particularly interesting, and kind of with this data helped our team identify it as a potential opportunity. You can see that from the beginning, had the highest level of engagement. However, it was falling at a steady pace within the first 10 seconds of the spot, and really kind of never took a foothold like the other 2 did, at least to having some consistent or rising engagement at the beginning. And you can see that through the second half of the spot, although they kind of came close, Hunter did have some bright moments in the middle compared to the other 2. And as I kind of talked about earlier, one of the things that's hard is how can you identify an opportunity where a spot could be improved? And I think we kind of all looked at this data and said, this is worth analyzing and potentially optimizing further. So that's kind of our process when it comes to analyzing video data and the technology that we use. I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to
Steve. Before you turn it over, we have a question from the audience about the test audience. Who is the test audience for this immersion testing?
Great question. So generally speaking, when we run studies like this through the lab, we generally try to target more of an acquisition audience. So what we're aiming for are people who are self-reported donors within the last month or within the last couple of months, at least, so that we know that they've been donors. We also are looking for people who match a DRTV demographic profile. So we try to match it to the DRTV audience that this is going to be going out to, both in terms of the networks, and if it's so for DRTV, we kind of have a pretty precise age, gender, regional profile that we try to follow. But that's flexible based on whatever the program might be. So if it's CTV, we might go a little bit younger. If it's something that's more digital, it might be a little bit younger. If it's male, it might be a little bit older. So we try to tailor the audience to the goals of who are we trying to acquire in terms of strategy.
Thank you.
Of course.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the media aspects of getting that wonderful video creative that the team talked to you about on air, and some of the differences in your media portfolio. At the end of the day, though, that video storytelling, which is in some ways, adds elements that a display or an email or a direct mail piece can't provide, right? There's something unique about video. And the beauty of this is that you can use it across so many platforms that it has a lot of strategic opportunity. It can be everything from fundraising to some kind of emergency response, lead gen, brand raising, just to get your brand awareness higher, as well as advocacy, and in some cases, in some tactics, event participation. So we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of these. At the end of the day, as we spoke about, it's great to have a portfolio where you're utilizing video across multiple channels, and they're each have benefits. DRTV is really the last best channel for getting your ad exposed to a national audience. There's not really too many other tactics that can do that today. And so because of that, you're able to generate monthly donors at scale. And because of that national exposure, it also helps lift the performance of your other channels. Earned media provides that great surround sound messaging. Earned media is a little different, right? It's not something that you're paying for. You're getting donated media from networks and other billboards and other partners. So it might be audio or out of home or print, but it provides these additional touches at the most efficient cost. And so we'll talk a little bit about how earned media works in a second. CTV allows you to target individual audiences and individuals, and it also can help you reach places that DRTV cannot, right? There is some cord cutting happening, obviously. So this will give you a chance to get that same messaging out to those audiences. Because it is a digital tactic, I can target specific individuals. We're going to talk more about that. But it also allows engagement, right? I can follow a CTV touch with a display ad where they can literally click and make it to your page. So there's some engagement possibilities in this that the others don't offer. And because it's digital, there's known exposure and your measurement becomes much more accurate. So we'll talk about that in reporting. In terms of a budget, there are different costs for these different tactics. DRTV is not for the faint of heart. A pilot to just understand if this channel is even something that might be feasible for you is really an all-in price of about $800K to 1 million. So it's, again, it does require some investment and dedication in it. Now, those costs include everything. That's your typical creative, the media, all of the startup costs are baked into that number. So they'll give you a feel for if you wanted to start a program, that's really what it's going to take. After that point, the rollout, once you've achieved some success in the pilot and it shows you that this can work for you, it really ranges. There are people who are out there just spending about 2 million and have a smaller program to obviously the large ones that we're all familiar with who are on television, like a St. Jude or a Shriners Hospitals, where they're spending, much more than that. Typically, what you're looking for is at least $500 or less to acquire a sustainer. And when you do that, that typically gives you around a 2-year payback. If you can bring it down to below 500, now you're talking 18 months and maybe even a year of payback. So that's kind of what you're looking for in there. Earned media is again, you're trying to get at the inventory that they could not sell, and instead of putting some advertisements around their own network, networks like to showcase and show their goodwill by placing nonprofits ads. And so typically what's there is you're paying for somebody and a management team to actively pitch to those networks that they should pick your creative over anybody else. And we'll talk a little bit about that. That's typically that service for that pitching and that reporting is about $150K, but typically the value of the earned media is often around 9 million or more in any given year. So it's usually well worth it to engage these services. CTV, as we said, is typically a more cost-efficient way of getting into television. Usually a 4-month pilot all in is about $200K. That includes the creative and data and modeling fees. And then once you've shown success, typically a rollout could be anywhere from $30K a month or more. Most clients can move to evergreen once they've shown success there. In terms of the payback, it really depends on how you're using CTV. That return on ad spend is going to be dependent on if you're doing true acquisition, in which case it might be a 0.4, 0.5 return on ad spend, because obviously acquisition will come at a cost, to something that is going to be more than break even if you're going after active audiences, where they're already engaged with you and you're trying to get that next gift, or you're trying to upgrade a one-time donor to a sustainer or even a mid-level. And there you're going to have a 1.5 or even higher depending on that active audience. A reactivation strategy might be just around break even. So it just depends on what you want to do and the proportion of budget you put to each of those audiences. In terms of how the buying is done, it is also quite different. So DRTV buying is actually buying remnant inventory. And what I mean by that is the commercial advertisers place their buy usually at the beginning of a year. And they buy up all the inventory they want for at least half a year or the full year. And they make those agreements with the networks. Anything that's left over goes to sale at remnant, which is really a fraction of the cost that the commercial buyers are spending. So we might pay a third or even a quarter of what the commercial vendors are paying for the same time periods. And because of that, really it requires relationships with each of the ad sales groups at all of the different networks, because you're bidding on that time. So you might say, I want to be on CNN between 2 and 4 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'm willing to pay X dollars for it. You have to be the highest bidder to win that spot. Others are going to come in and try to outbid you. So how much are you willing to pay for that? And if there's any fire sales, you want the network reps to say and call you back and say, hey, I see you didn't clear, but if you spend $20 more, you will, right? You want those relationships because that's how it works. In DRTV, you are targeting networks and programming. It's not at the individual level, right? I can say, I believe the audience for this particular program is the right audience. And so I'm going to bid on that program on that network, but I'm not at the individual level, right? They sell a spot to one person and it goes and gets that national exposure. CTV, I'm going to skip there for a minute, is one-to-one, right? Every individual who goes online could be served a different ad. So I'm down to the individual. There I'm paying per impression. And those impressions are available on an open ad exchange through a DSP partner. So what happens is, for example, I might say Becca is on my list to target. And when Becca goes online, her information immediately gets anonymized and passed into the DSP or the open ad exchange, where the DSP platform that you're working on, it might be the Trade Desk or Amazon or Google, will say, okay, I see the list of people that you want to serve, Janet, and Becca happens to be on it, and she happens to be on like right now. Do you want to buy her inventory? And we place a bid on it. And that process happens in milliseconds. It's immediate, it's fast, so that as soon as she goes on, she is her information goes in and we match it and we buy her inventory. Same thing when you're about to download a podcast. It immediately attaches the ads at that moment you're downloading. It happens in milliseconds. So that's how we buy CTV. Earned media, again, is when a network has inventory that they could not sell. Or maybe a national commercial advertiser backs out at the last minute, which they can do as part of their contract. So instead of obviously having dead air, which they can't have, they will actually then place an ad that they already have on their servers, easy to upload. And so what you want to do is have people pushing those network relationships to say, you should be airing Make-A-Wish. This is important to your viewers. And the people you're dealing with on earned media is different than the linear media buys. Those are the advertising group. For earned media, it's the content managers, right? They are the ones who decide what content gets to be put on the networks. So it's a different set of people that requires a different set of relationships. Any questions on media, feel free to submit. So let's talk now about who we're
We do have a
targeting.
question, I'm sorry, in the chat, when you say $9 million in value from earned media, that's based on the GRP impression value of the airtime, correct? Not based on revenue acquired from the PSA.
Yes, so when you're getting earned media, in some ways it's considered donated or a gift in kind. We have an evaluation process that says, what would this be worth if someone went out to buy that time? So what you can do is, and this is an auditable process where we give you back the value of that time. And you can use that as a gift in kind offset to your cost of fundraising. So it actually helps reduce that metric.
Thank you.
Let's talk for a little bit about who are we targeting in each of these different kinds of tactics. For DRTV, the target audience is the 50+ viewer, and there are some reasons for that. The good news is that this audience controls a lot of household wealth. They often are the most generous generation, and they're responsible for about 41% of all individual donations. They also happen to be the most likely to respond to a sustaining offer. Remember, the point of DRTV is to generate a sustainer for you. That's different than generating a one-time gift. That audience who cares about that, who's willing to do it, is different. And when they do, this 50+ viewer is more likely to retain. So they have higher retention rates than their younger counterparts who might also give you a monthly gift. But the real reason, and this is why it becomes a perfect storm, is that they happen to watch the most television. In some cases, as you get to 60+, it's about 6 or 7 hours a day. They are also the audience who is still picking linear television over streaming. They do stream, don't get me wrong, but they do it at much lower rates. And they spend less time streaming. They spend more time on linear, and that's been pretty well tracked now by a number of different entities. So they become this perfect audience. So that's who we're going after from the TV audience. And then the point is knowing when and where they're watching, right? People tend to watch different things at different times of the day. People watch more television in winter than in summer. So, right, all of that audience behavior is something we track and try to find across the dial. In terms of your PSA, remember, the person who is the decision maker here isn't the end audience. It is that network content manager, right? They are looking for content that is something they think their viewers is going to like. And really, at the end of the day it's often any information that has a local bent, right? Because a lot of the content managers A lot of what your earned media is going to be, some of it will be national, but a lot of it will be the local broadcast pickup. And so where you have, right, if we have a Wish kid who happens to be from a particular area, they're going to be very interested in that. So any way you can localize or make the case for local is really important. Also is how do they get the content, right? We want to make it really easy for those content managers to easily download the spot that is already TV ready, right? Broadcast ready. And so, for example, at More, we have a portal where it's very simple for them to see all the different content, to learn about the organization, and pick and choose the right content that they would like to place. CTV is perhaps the most interesting because, again, in this case, I can target specific individuals. Like I said earlier, I can go after Becca, for example, because she is somebody who is on my targeted list. So let's take a minute just to talk a minute about CTV because it does offer you the most flexibility. And really, because of that, you can go after these 4 strategies. You can go after an acquisition file. So you could have a co-op modeled set of prospective donors and target those people specifically. You can take your lapsed donors, model them to say they might be lapsed to you, but they might not be lapsed to organizations just like you. And go after that and rank order your current lapsed file to say these are more likely to reactivate than these others. Let's spend our money at the top of that modeled list and target them specifically to see if we can reactivate them. You can model folks to determine who on your current file might be giving sustaining gifts to other organizations, or potentially who might be giving mid-level gifts to other organizations, and target them with specific asks and lead them to specific donation forms that might have a higher ask arrays for that mid-level. The other nice thing about CTV is it can be combined with other tactics. So for example, targeting a direct mail acquisition file before it gets in home, let's start to warm that audience with CTV ads. Before you're about to do outbound telemarketing, let's warm that audience with one of the CTV video ads. When we do that, we find that the performance, the lift of those tactics, email, direct mail, or telemarketing, increase for the audience who served the additional touches through video. Becca's going to talk a minute about what we are doing for Make-A-Wish.
So at Make-A-Wish, we are doing a huge combination of everything that Janet just spoke to. And we're really narrowing down what we're doing based on the audience for each channel. So our content really looks, it's cohesive in the sense that it's a campaign, but it is pretty different across the board depending on where you're being targeted and how. And like I said earlier, we are very much in the world of needing to do more with less. So we are really focusing on the health of our file and understanding all of our audiences in each of our channels. Our prospecting efforts are primarily focused on sustainer audiences as a way to grow that base. And we use Simeo to help score many of those audiences. And we are serving those asks to not only our prospecting group, but we also are serving them to some of our other key donor groups to convert them into higher value donors. Co-targeting is a place that our organization has found some success. I'll speak to that a little bit later. And we also are always trying to just ensure that we are renewing our current donor base at a healthy rate. And when we combine all of these approaches, it's allowed us to really understand these donors and help us make investment decisions to make sure that we are putting our dollars behind targeting the right people at the right place at the right time.
So now it comes to the all-important evaluating performance. There are different metrics for each of these tactics. For DRTV, the key metric is to get the lowest cost to acquire a monthly donor. And that's really, again, what the point of DRTV is. Now, there are other metrics that are part of that performance, and certainly metrics that will move or act as levers to that decreased cost per monthly donor. But what we're looking at is the buy generating phone and web traffic. Is that traffic converting to a donor, ideally a monthly donor? How many donors are we generating? What is their average gift? And what is the revenue? And those are all kind of the initial metrics, but at the end of the day, we also want to make sure that the donors that we are bringing on, especially those sustainers, are retaining and generating a healthy LTV. Because again, this has a 2-year payback. And so part of that payback metric is making sure that they do retain and give you additional gifts, including their monthly gift, to pay back faster. In terms of earned media, as we talked about, the key metrics of that is the value of the earned media, right? We're going to give you the evaluation of what you would have paid if it was not donated to you, and the number of impressions that you've received from that. We also provide the number of airings and the locations of airings. What networks, were they national, were they local? And if they were local, what geographies? CTV, because it's in some ways a digital tactic, has the key metrics there are return on ad spend and cost per acquisition. But we're also looking at other metrics like the click-through rates. You can't click on a CTV spot, but we follow those same individuals with display. And so what is the click-through rate of that engagement? The cost per visit, the hope is that we're generating web traffic and that then converts to donors. So we'll look at donor counts and average gift. And then because CTV in a lot of ways is top of funnel, because again, I can't click on a CTV spot, is the program lifting performance of your other tactics, which are last click. And the same thing here, especially if we're going after sustainers, is there retention and LTV on those donors?
For Make-A-Wish specifically, DRTV has been a really great opportunity for us to create even more national exposure for our brand. We have the very good fortune of being a pretty well-established nonprofit brand, but this allows us to reach more people who either may not have heard of us or may have some misconceptions about the work that we do or the people that we serve. What we're seeing is not only are we getting really great numbers of impressions since we launched, but we are driving a really strong web response with our programs. We're seeing that for both direct to that URL that we have in our spots, but also just the number of donations that we see coming in through our main website that aren't necessarily directly attributable to those spots. We're also seeing that our monthly gift is consistently higher than the $20 ask that we have, both through the call center and online, which is really promising and part of what's helping us beat that industry standard cost to acquire of $500.
We also want to look at some of the CTV metrics that you should be looking at in your program. One of them is time to conversion, right? When you think about digital tactics, a lot of folks will have a 30-day look back period, or at least the 2 weeks. But what we find fairly consistently is the video has a shorter time to conversion. And you can see here, this is a pretty standard line of you're seeing really about 2/3 of the response is happening within 3 days of exposure. And almost 85% is happening within the week. So it has a quick conversion path, and which is obviously one of the reasons why it works so well. Another metric we're looking at is it lifting the performance of those last click tactics? And so what the platforms should be able to provide you is, because what we do is we put a pixel on your donation forms in your main pages, is the platform can read all of the folks who might have converted by Google or email and Bing, and look at the conversion rates of those people who were served the CTV ad and those who were not served the CTV ad. And is there a demonstrable difference in their conversion rates when they see a CTV spot? And you can see here in this data where there actually is a large difference in those who've been served and those who haven't been served. So it just gives you another way to show what this top of funnel tactic can do. And then one other analytics report that can be provided is understanding paths to conversions and looking at the difference. So these are taking all the people who've converted and understanding, was a video touch on their path or not? And if it was on their path, how many impressions did they need to convert? And you can see here, and again, this is a pretty typical set of results, is that there are much fewer impressions needed if one of them is a video impression. And so again, it just shows you the power of what video can do that's different than email or display or even a social ad. So wherever you can, I think we've seen more and more embedding video in text, embedding video in social, right? The more places you put it, we're starting to see that video can have a real impact. Becca's going to share her co-targeting results.
Video also has really had a positive impact on our offline programs. So we have had some pretty exciting results with the co-targeting that we've done. I think that there's still some more work to do here in the future. But not only across both of these audiences are we seeing an improved return on ad spend, but we're also seeing a lift in their response rate, which based on what Janet just showed is really not that surprising, but it's always good when you see it come back. The response rate lift for our acquisition audience, I think, is especially exciting for us and really is creating some new opportunity with our program. And then that really strong return on ad spend with our renewal audience tells us that this is a place that is worth continued investment.
So in addition to the in-market analytics, we also have the data from our research that we did with the immersion technology that I described earlier. So again, just reorienting everyone, x-axis is time, and then on the y-axis is our immersion quotient. And what we do with each of these spots in terms of the analysis is we look through each of these kind of curves and try to identify moments of engagement, disengagement, and what we call minor moments. So you'll see the moments of engagement are in green numbers, moments of disengagement are in red numbers, and the minor moments are in gray. And the reason that we break it up like this is because when it comes to creative, there are going to be rises and falls in engagement as the story is told. And really what we're looking for in our analysis are opportunities for optimization, like we talked about earlier. Moments where something happened, where we lost engagement in a place that we shouldn't have. So just as an example, it's pretty typical that when we put, maybe a full slate on the screen, not surprising to see a loss in engagement overall, just because it's more text than it is the imagery and the video and kind of the more emotional content. When it's more cognitive engagement, you're going to see a drop in engagement, and that's not surprising. So while we mark those things along the way, really what we're looking for are moments that kind of don't fit, where we're losing engagement, where maybe we shouldn't be, where we were trying to build an emotional moment, but it either fell flat or that we're losing engagement where we otherwise expected to. One of those opportunities that we identified just for looking at the previous curve was around 20 to 28 seconds, 21 to 28 seconds here during the hunter spot in particular. The beginning of the spot we found in a lot of our research is crucial to bringing the audience in, to helping them understand the impact and understanding kind of the background of, especially when it's a first person story like this, understanding kind of the need and the challenge and how the organization is helping to address that need. And in this case with Hunter Story, we saw at the beginning, as I described earlier, the constant drop, but really we saw a very steep decline around 21 to 28 seconds, which is earlier than we've seen with a lot of our other clients. And this moment of disengagement occurred as the audience started to view imagery and footage of children who were not Hunter for the first time in the spot and also where we introduced the lower third. So after looking at the qualitative interview and combining it with this biometric data, our team concluded that it seemed like the audience needed a bit more time to form an emotional connection with Hunter, and that any emotional connection that was starting to build really was interrupted at this moment by bringing up the lower third as soon as it did. So while the lower third information is crucial and we need to get it on the screen as soon as we can from a UX perspective to make sure that our donors can call that phone number, go to that website as soon as they're moved to do so, sometimes we have to be cautious about interrupting an opportunity to build that emotion over time, and also at an opportunity where it otherwise might not fit as well as it could. So it's the first moment that the audience starts to realize that it's a fundraising advertisement, and the timing of that moment can be critical to the success of the spot. So this was an opportunity that we passed along to the creative team and our strategists to let them know that this might be a place that we could consider making some revisions if we so choose. Otherwise, moment to learn from and move on for the next round of creative. All right. I think we can move to the next slide, Dennis, whenever you're ready. Perfect. So I think I'll turn it over to, I think we're going to go ahead and watch now the edited version of the spot. And these edits were made, this final version of the spot was informed by, again, those moments that you kind of saw in the earlier curve. This is kind of the NeuroLab version of the spot after we made our revisions.
Hunter has been fighting cancer for most of his life. It's been tough. But Hunter has to be tough too. As tough as a dinosaur. Which is why when Hunter wished to be a dinosaur, we at Make-A-Wish knew we had to go big. Dino-sized.
We have unconfirmed reports of a suspicious animal on the loose.
A granted wish can change everything. It can replace fear with confidence, anxiety with hope, and bring joy to children and their families. Call or go online to grantwishes.org right now. Your gift to Make-A-Wish of $20 a month, just 67 cents a day or any amount, can help a child feel stronger and more hopeful. We're looking for 1,000 monthly donors to help grant life-changing wishes for waiting kids. Every 20 minutes, a child like Hunter is diagnosed with a critical illness. And for every wish we grant, there are 2 more children waiting. So please, call or go online now.
It lifts your heart a little bit in a sad time. So you know that he's at least going to have a day or 2 of just complete joy to where he doesn't have to worry about being a sick kid.
Granting wishes takes all of us, volunteers, communities, and someone like you. Become one of the next 1,000 monthly donors who are granting wishes to waiting kids. Call or go online to grantwishes.org right now. And when you use your credit card to make your monthly gift, we'll send you this limited edition Make-A-Wish t-shirt to show you are part of a movement that is transforming lives, one wish at a time. Your support will help give a child like Hunter the hope and strength to fight another day. Call or go online now to grantwishes.org. Your monthly gift will grant wishes to waiting children.
Well, I don't know how to follow that up any more than to talk maybe a little bit about some results. I love that spot. I think Britt said it best too. Like that spot always, I don't know how, but it makes all of us smile every time we see it. It's such a great spot. Yeah, and so not only can we say that it makes us feel good, but we can also say that that revision did significantly better than the original version did in market. We saw actually a 72% reduction in cost to acquire a monthly donor in this revised version of the spot compared to the original. So not only were we driving excellent results as far as that cost per monthly donor metric that Janet mentioned earlier, but when we're also thinking about overall revenue, the client, our team here also saw a 52% improvement in overall revenue with the new version of the spot after looking at the modeling, which is just an amazing result. So always good to see that when you have good creative and the whole process that's involved with this, you can just see that can really bring up some drastic changes in terms of performance as well.
And I think that this slide really speaks to some of what that performance has done for us over the course of this fiscal year. Since relaunching our DRTV program and expanding and kind of rethinking our CTV program, we have tripled the number of monthly donors that were able to acquire this year compared to all of the previous fiscal years in total. So that lighter green teal color at the bottom represents like our entire universe of monthly donors prior to this fiscal year. So the impact of this is still pretty fresh for us, but it's something that I think we're going to be feeling in a very positive way for years to come, especially as we continue to scale and optimize these programs. And if you are like me, you are probably looking at this slide and being like, that's great, but that's just number of donors. But how are they retaining? And the answer is very, very good. We have seen that diversifying into focusing on some of these higher value donor groups like sustainers is really having a positive effect on our program. It's not only bringing more monthly donors into the fold, but it's resulting in donors who are sticking around and ultimately going to develop that very strong lifetime value LTV number that we want to see. And video has just been such a huge part of this journey for Make-A-Wish over the last year and a half, 2 years, as we've been developing and rolling out some of these pilots. It allows us to speak to our donors and our prospects in a way that is engaging and compelling and really convinces them to donate. But it also, for our current donors, reminds them why they donated and why they want to continue to support us. It also gives us some really great flexibility to focus our content around the audience first strategy that we've talked about today, and really making sure, again, that we're serving them the right content in the right place at the right time.
Just interjecting a little bit on this too, just thinking about the power of video and how it augments and supports the audience in all the channels in which they engage. Just bringing that point that Becca just mentioned about engagement and retention. We've seen the impact of utilizing some of these stories in all of the channels. Last holiday in particular with one of the Wish kids, including Hunter. So the value of video is not just in the acquisition or conversion of sustainers, but it is a much broader, more powerful tool and engagement strategy that can be utilized no matter which audience you choose to focus on, or all of them, right? So we just wanted to say thank you as we close this out today. It's exciting to be able to bring Make-A-Wish's story into the fold and help articulate the value of the use of video to boost your retention and engagement strategies. We'll open it up to a Q&A session, but I just really wanted to say thank you on behalf of the panel here, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
So we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Feel free to put any questions that you have in there. Also, I know this panel is happy to accept any questions that you may be too shy to ask during the discussion. So the first question that we had is about the rising tide lifts all boats effect, Janet, that you talked a little bit about. Question about whether the why of that, is that because video is more credible, or do you think there are other reasons for that?
I do think that video is seen as more credible, but I also think it's because it also utilizes more of your senses, right? It's not just visual, it's got the auditory. And one of the things that we pay a lot of attention to is sound and sound effects, and what is the background music, and are we bringing in sound effects where it makes sense, and who is the voiceover artist or the celebrity artist that we're using. So sound is really important, and it's not something that exists in email or direct mail. And And even digital video often is prepared with the idea that people will have the sound off, but television is sound on. And so, right, it gives you that extra sensory piece to add it. But yeah, I do think that video is seen as credible.
And then we have a question about the 3 calls to action being ideal, or at least 3 calls to action being ideal. Has there been research that suggests that going above a certain limit, more than 3 or more than X amount, reduces sustainer acquisition or has a different effect? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of specific research testing that, but I think the 3 calls to action, it has to do with the time length. So in a 2-minute spot, that's putting you, roughly every sort of 30, 40 seconds or so. And a part of that is, making sure that you're balancing that unfolding of that story. So it's all about that emotion. And it can be disruptive, as you saw, but it's such a necessary part of it, because we know when donors are reading, they're skimming, they're not paying as close attention as we are. Of course, we want them to, but the reality is they're probably not looking at every single second. And so we want to make sure that we're constantly using that repetition, but we have to balance it in a way where allowing the story to breathe and then punctuating it with those calls to action so that we're getting that in enough times if they catch it on the 2nd try, if they catch it on the 3rd try, and then also making sure that we're doing it at the appropriate points where we've built the case for support, we've captured their hearts, and now we're giving them a relief valve. Here's an opportunity to do something. So it's really, there's science to it. We've just seen on balance, successful spots tend to have at least 3. But it's really, you just have to be really careful in balancing what is the story that you're telling with where and when and how many calls to action you place in that spot.
And that's DRTV. I say CTV, where you
DRTV,
only have 30 seconds, does not have 3 asks, right?
No,
It's
no, no, yeah,
1
it's
to
just
2,
DRTV.
depending on what we're doing and what the story time is, because you have just much less time. So it's
Right.
all about time as well.
And PSAs, typically, it's just sort of at the end where you're asking someone to learn more, go here to learn more, and you're just letting that story unfold. But yeah, I'm not aware of any specific research or laws of diminishing returns if you have 4 or 5 calls to action. I don't know, Nick or Steve, if you are, but I'm not aware of any specific research that's been done on that.
I'm not aware of any necessarily. I know that we have seen sometimes, again, like we showed with even the lower third, right? Timing is everything, like Jennifer just said. It's so important, and that balance. Sometimes the balance of it in some spots in the past that we've tested, I think we've seen every once in a while when the balance gets off, you can see the engagement drop a bit more where the balance was off, but we've never done any specific comparisons to see at what point does it really cause engagement to drop off overall. But in the very few anecdotal cases that we've seen through the lab where maybe it's a little bit imbalanced, we have seen some drops in engagement at that point.
Thank you. Those are the questions that we had in the chat.
Any others?
Well, if you have any questions, there are plenty of us to answer offline. You can feel free to reach out to Joey, whose name is on this page, and they will be happy to engage with you. We are just, we're incredibly grateful for your time. We know it's precious, and we hope that you came away with some great action items and ideas to inspire you in how to integrate video fundraising into your lexicon, in your programs.